The records show it departed from a private boat launch at 9:56 a.m., arriving at the island by 11:14 and staying there until 4:30 p.m. In audio of a call around that time to a private towing company obtained from the same records request, the caller explains a mechanical issue with the boat.
Hello everyone. So the homegoing celebration, the funeral will be held at Center Point Church in Ocean Springs. It is going to be, visitation will be 9 to 11, and then the funeral will start after that. The plan is for the repast because, again, we want to celebrate Nolan.
Brief. I want justice for Daniel. Why would you throw away his clothes and delete messages and not even call his mother?
They saw them go. They're two white individuals with a black male, and then when they returned to the car, they did not see that black male.
Why do two black teenagers in two different states, months apart, both end up dead in the water after a day out with people who weren't black? Why did the people with them, in both cases, walk away and say nothing instead of calling for help? Why does a piece of evidence in each case, a phone in one, a set of location records in the other, contradict itself the moment someone actually checks it? Why do both families, hundreds of miles apart, use the exact same word for what they've been told? That it doesn't add up? And why is it the same civil rights attorney standing beside both mothers, telling reporters these aren't two coincidences? They're the same pattern, twice? If you've been following either story, you already know the version from a week ago isn't the version we have today. So if you want every update the moment it breaks, go ahead and hit subscribe now, because what we're about to walk through raises more questions than it answers. Wells's friends made it back to the mainland the afternoon of July 4th. Hours passed before anyone raised an alarm, and it was close to 11 that night before his mother learned from one of the friends that Nolan hadn't come back. The response pulled in the Jackson County Sheriff's Department, the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, the Gulf Islands National Seashore, the Coast Guard, and the volunteer group United Cajun Navy, whose National Vice President, Brian Trasher, says his group stayed in contact with Wells's mother from the moment he was reported missing. The Coast Guard logged an official search bulletin the next afternoon. Wells's father went out on the water that same morning with his son's former coach, searching on his own before the official search was fully underway. They found nothing that day. A park ranger found Wells's body off the island's northwestern tip on the morning of July 6th. The Park Service's superintendent, Rick Clark, confirmed rangers took part in the recovery, but hasn't said how the island was being patrolled that day in the first place. Wells's parents got his phone back before investigators did. When they sat down with it, they cross-checked his location history across two apps, Life 360 and Snapchat, expecting them to match. They didn't. Two records of where their son had been that day told two different stories, and nobody's explained the mismatch. There's harder data too. The Mississippi Department of Marine Resources tracks registered boats by GPS, and CBS News obtained the log for the vessel that carried Wells to Horn Island. It left a private dock at 9:56 that morning, reached the island by 11:14, then pulled away again at 4:31 that afternoon without Wells on it, heading back to the same dock. From there, it moved into Fort Bayou around 5:52, returned to the dock by 6:06, then turned up at a different boat launch entirely at 7:19, before being hauled overland to a residence in Biloxi. Whose residence? Nobody said yet. Around the same time, NBC obtained audio of the boat's operator radioing for help that afternoon. The bilge pump had failed. The boat was taking on water. He needed a tow. A dispatcher asked if everyone aboard was accounted for. The operator said yes. That call happened right around when the boat left the island, and it confirms a real mechanical emergency happened. What it doesn't confirm is whether Wells was ever supposed to still be on that boat when the emergency started.
This morning, we're learning more about the Independence Day boat trip Nolan Wells and his friends took to Mississippi's Horn Island. As part of a records request to the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, NBC News obtained GPS information for the boat. The records show it departed from a private boat launch at 9:56 a.m., arriving at the island by 11:14 and staying there until 4:30 p.m. In audio of a call around that time to a private towing company obtained from the same records request, the caller explains a mechanical issue with the boat.
We're sinking. Can you all please come?
The towing company dispatched reaching out to a local captain for help.
It sounds like a bunch of kids on board on Horn Island, and he's saying the boat is sinking. He wants you guys to go out there and unpump the boat and then tow it in.
Records then show the boat being towed slowly from about 4:31 until 5:25 before getting back to normal speed. The boat then returned to its original location at 5:44 without Nolan Wells. Melissa Miller was at Horn Island on the 4th. She says there were hundreds of boaters there for the holiday.
It's just a big community. Everyone goes out there and, has a good time.
She also says it's normal to leave cell phones on boats and that currents at the northwest corner of the island can be treacherous.
Like you can go out there just innocently and next thing you know, the water's, it's like kind of sucking you in, throwing you back out.
A local judge, Ashley Cole, whose son Warren was among the last people to see Wells alive that afternoon, has said, the trouble started not long after. She's since deactivated her Facebook, saying photos of her minor children had begun circulating online. Elmore Wansley has said on national television that he doesn't believe his son chose to stay behind, and a friend who was on the island, Javon Williams, has said the same. That version doesn't match the person he knew. Crump has pushed back on the idea that Wells just got into trouble in the water, pointing out that he knew how to swim and was in athletic shape. One detail did get settled. Jackson County Coroner Bruce Lind confirmed the swimsuit recovered on the body matched the one Wells wore in the last photos taken of him, shutting down one strand of online speculation. The Ocean Springs School District has since released a statement calling itself shocked and heartbroken. Part of why this case spiraled online traces back to a single video that appeared to show Wells raising his voice at someone during the boat trip. Crump referenced it directly, saying he understood it to show Wells and another person yelling at each other, and said investigators were telling the family they saw no sign of foul play despite that clip existing. The sheriff's office asked the public for any unedited footage from that day. One friend who was there, Triseston Shepard, eventually said the voice everyone assumed belonged to someone confronting Wells was actually his own, not a fight, and that people needed to let the investigation run its course instead of building a case off a clip with no context. Wells's family retained Ben Crump on July 7th, 3 days after he went missing. Crump says he hasn't spoken directly to the two young men who were with Wells because both have retained their own lawyers, a normal step, but one that's kept the family from getting answers straight from the people who were there. A week before this round of updates, Christine Wansley said the sheriff's early framing of an accidental drowning made her and Wells's father uncomfortable, asking why investigators were in such a hurry to land on that explanation before the physical evidence was even back. The FBI is now assisting Jackson County investigators, a shift Sheriff Ledbetter has confirmed directly, describing the Bureau's role as support rather than a takeover. Ledbetter says this past week produced real, if unspecified, progress from public tip, and he's still asking anyone with photos, video, or first-hand accounts to come forward. Separately, Christine Wansley met face-to-face this week with District Attorney Angel Myers-McElrath for the first time since her son's body was found. The result? Once the sheriff's office finishes its work, the case goes to a grand jury. That word makes people assume charges are coming. But in Jackson County, any unexplained or unnatural death goes to a grand jury as routine, whether or not anyone is suspected of wrongdoing. It isn't an accusation against anyone. The Congressional Black Caucus has since added its own statement, saying, too many questions remain unanswered and demanding a full, transparent, timely investigation. What's still missing? An official cause of death, any arrest, any charge, and the independent autopsy the family commissioned, which was expected around July 10th and has been delayed over the logistics of moving Wells's body. Now Texas, and a detail that only became public this past week.
We have a major break tonight to tell you about in the death of a North Texas teen. It was supposed to be a fun day of fishing for 3 young men at Lake Ray Hubbard. Instead, it turned deadly after the group jumped in to swim, and 18-year-old Daniel Irving never resurfaced. Now, months later, police have arrested a 19-year-old they say tried to cover up and hide what actually happened that day.
Daniel Irving's medical examiner report, drawing on witness statements, says he surfaced once after jumping from a railroad bridge near Miller Road into Lake Ray Hubbard, called out for help, then went under and didn't come back up. The 2 people with him, 19-year-old Lucas Roper and a 17-year-old, didn't go in after him and didn't call anyone. Once he disappeared, the report and the arrest affidavit both say the other 2 got rid of his belongings and left. Not just his phone, but his driver's license and his cash. Both things his family says make no sense for an accident. Roper gave his own account to detectives. On the record, he panicked, he and the younger suspect fled without reporting anything, and he deleted every message between himself and Irving because he knew an investigation was coming. Prosecutors haven't said whether they believe him. He was charged with tampering with physical evidence, a 3rd-degree felony, and released on a $10,000 bond. It's worth being clear about what that charge can and can't become. Legal analyst Jeremy Rosenthal, who has no connection to the case, has pointed out that proving murder requires evidence Roper and the other suspect actually caused Irving's death, not just that they behaved badly afterward. Panicking and hiding evidence isn't, on its own, proof of causing a death. Prosecutors would need something closer to a direct act tied to the drowning itself. That's the gap Irving's family is trying to close, and it's why this could realistically stay at tampering charges no matter how loudly they push for more. Irving's mother filed a missing persons report on April 14th, the day after the lake trip. 2 days later, Rowlett police issued a public alert noting his license and cash were missing too, something officials called unusual for him, even before his body was found on April 17th. Dallas police are now the lead agency, since his death occurred inside Dallas city limits. At a press conference after the arrests, Tamika Irving stood beside Crump and said her son had gotten only partial justice. She also said, for the first time publicly, that he went by a family nickname, Mike, and that this is a fight for Mike. Crump was more forceful, telling the room the family wasn't interested in partial or half justice, only full justice, framing the day itself in a line that stuck. 2 young men who weren't black came to pick him up. The 3 of them went to swim, and only 2 came back. The Next Generation Action Network had already been pressing Dallas police for weeks before any arrest, sending an open letter to the police chief in June. Nobody in the department has explained, on record, why it took roughly 2.5 months to arrest anyone, given that both suspects were reportedly interviewed within days of Irving's death. The arrest warrant wasn't signed until July 8th, and Roper wasn't taken into custody until July 9th. CNN has asked Dallas police directly why it took that long to act on evidence that, by the department's own account, existed almost from the start. As of now, they haven't gotten an answer. Neither case exists apart from the town it happened in. Wells was reportedly the only black person in the group photographed with him that day, and Ocean Springs, where his family lives, is close to 80% white by recent census numbers. Reverend Al Sharpton, standing with the Wells family, has said something about the case simply doesn't smell right to him. Crump's framing of the Irving case does similar work from a different angle, one more instance in his telling of a young black man's death getting a slower, quieter response than it should have. Whether race actually shaped either investigation isn't something either case has settled, and it's likely something neither one ever fully will. What is settled is that both families believe it did. Here's what actually connects these 2 stories. Ben Crump now represents both families, sitting beside both mothers within days of each other, saying he sees one pattern in both deaths. A young black man goes out with people he trusts, and only some of them come back. Crump was already representing the Wells family in early July when he stepped in for the Irvings too, meaning the same office was building both cases at once, even though the underlying facts of each death have nothing to do with each other. These are not the same legal case. Nothing that happened at Lake Ray Hubbard bears on what happened at Horn Island, and they sit under two different prosecutors in two different states. What Crump has built is a shared campaign for accountability, not a shared crime, but it means pressure. In one case now has a direct line into the other, through the same attorney, the same press conferences, and increasingly the same audience. Both 18. Both dead in water months apart in the same year. In both, the people who were with them left without them. Both involve a piece of digital evidence that doesn't add up. Roper's wiped phone in one case, Wells is contradicting location data in the other. And in both, a parent has gone public rejecting the official account, Irving's mother calling the charges partial justice, Wells's father saying the story doesn't match his son. But the facts underneath split hard, and timing is most of it. Irving died in April, and his case already has 2 people arrested and charged 3 months later. Wells died in July, and as of now, nobody has been arrested, nobody's been charged, and there's no official cause of death at all. Irving's case is settled on the central medical question, accidental drowning, per the Dallas County Medical Examiner, even as the family disputes what that ruling leaves out. Wells's case doesn't have that much yet, with the independent autopsy still delayed, and what happened after each death looks different in how deliberate it appears to have been. Irving's case has an admitted, on-record account of evidence destroyed on purpose. Wells's case has no such allegation, just records that don't agree with each other. Wells had dinner at home with his family the night before the trip, and was due back at Southwest Mississippi Community College within days to start preseason training as a wide receiver. His coach has described him as someone who led by example and treated people with respect, on and off the field. His mother has called him a special soul who was always trying to lift other people up. His father's one rule for group outings was simple: if you go somewhere together, you come back together. Part of why him being left on that island still doesn't sit right with either parent? Irving was an honor roll student and swim team member at Saxa High School. According to his sister, he'd been preparing to enlist in the military, and she said it feels senseless that his life ended the way it did, with 2 people beside him who chose silence over calling for help. His mother has said plainly that she wants justice, not sympathy, and that she won't accept an explanation that doesn't account for why 2 people ran instead of trying to save him. In Texas, it comes down to whether the Dallas County DA takes the case to a grand jury for something beyond tampering, a different use of the term than in Mississippi, since a Texas grand jury here would mean prosecutors are actively seeking an indictment on a more serious charge, not a routine referral. Irving's family and the Next Generation Action Network say they intend to keep pressure on that decision and on getting an answer for the 2.5-month gap before anyone was arrested. In Mississippi, it comes down to 2 things that haven't happened yet: the delayed independent autopsy and the sheriff's office finishing its work before its own grand jury referral. With the FBI now involved and public tips reportedly producing real leads, that timeline could move faster than it has so far. Watch for 3 things: the release of Wells's independent autopsy results, any statement from the Dallas County DA on whether the Irving case goes in front of a grand jury for more than tampering, and any new evidence either legal team decides to make public next. Given how much has surfaced in just the past week, it's unlikely either family or Crump's office is done releasing what they have. Subscribe if you want to be here when either one breaks again.